The sword rested in the dim light, its blade gleaming faintly as though it held a secret no one dared uncover. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary weapon, polished, balanced, and deadly in the right hands. But there was something unusual about it, an aura, a silent hum in the air, as if the steel itself was alive and waiting. When it struck at just 10% of its potential, it was already sharper than anything most had ever seen. With the lightest swing, the blade sliced clean through bamboo, fabric, and bone as though they were made of air. Witnesses swore they didn't even feel the pressure before the cut was complete. At 10%, it was terrifying. But that was just the beginning. The wielder, a man hardened by countless battles, knew better than to underestimate what he carried. His grip was steady, but his heart raced with the knowledge of the secret buried in that blade. It wasn't forged by ordinary hands, nor tempered by the usual fires. Rumors whispered of a hidden forge, buried deep within mountains that no map dared reveal, where flames burned blue and the hammers rang with echoes not of this world. There, the sword was born, quenched not in oil or water, but in the essence of something ancient, something that gave it a pulse. It waited centuries, dormant, until someone worthy could unlock its fury. And now, in this quiet room, its power was stirring. At 10%, it drew blood faster than thought. The sound it made as it cut was barely audible, like silk tearing, a whisper of death. The wielder, cautious and deliberate, tested it on wood, stone, and iron bars. Every strike left behind perfection, edges so clean that the surfaces gleamed as though polished. But the danger wasn't in what it could do at 10%. The real terror, the real story, began when he dared unleash more. 20% was chaos. Stone cracked like glass. Steel bars that resisted hammers shattered in seconds. The room grew colder each time he swung, as if the air itself recoiled from the violence. His arms ached, not from effort, but from the sheer force that reverberated back through the hilt. Still, curiosity gnawed at him. How much further could it go? At 30%, the strike wasn't just physical, it carried a shockwave. The ground trembled under his feet. Dust and fragments flew outward, slicing the air like shrapnel. Observers had to cover their faces, their eyes wide with disbelief. They whispered that this was no sword, but a curse, something born to test the line between human and God. The wielder's own fear grew with every increment. Yet fear was never enough to stop him. He had carried this blade through war, through blood, through the cries of enemies who never saw their end coming. He had seen kingdoms fall, but never had he seen a weapon that frightened him more than the armies he fought. At 50%, the steel itself began to glow faintly, an eerie light that made the blade look as if it had been pulled from the heart of a star. With one strike, an entire boulder disintegrated into dust, finer than sand. The sound echoed like thunder rolling through caverns. The air smelled of iron, ozone, and fire all at once. Every living thing nearby felt the pressure, their hearts pounding out of rhythm. Birds fell from the sky. Even the earth seemed to resist, cracking and groaning under the strain. It was too much, too unnatural. And yet, he pressed further. He wanted to see the end. At 70%, the weapon no longer felt like it belonged to him. His hands gripped the hilt, but the blade moved with a will of its own, eager, hungry. Sparks danced across the edge, tiny arcs of lightning snapping into the air. The mere motion of lifting it sent vibrations through the ground. When it struck, the world went silent for a fraction of a second, as if even sound was cleaved apart. The silence was broken by a roaring blast that flattened everything within reach. Walls crumbled, trees shredded into splinters. It was no longer just a weapon. It was destruction incarnate, and still not yet at its full power. At 90%, the blade roared. It screamed like a storm trapped in steel. The wielder's vision blurred, his ears rang with the sound of tearing skies. The strike unleashed was not a cut, but a rift. Reality itself seemed to warp, bending around the slash. The ground split open, molten rock hissing as it met air. The steel glowed white-hot, no longer resembling metal, but a fragment of something divine. Those who watched from afar fell to their knees, unable to comprehend the devastation. They spoke of gods, of demons, of powers that no human should ever wield. And still, there was one more step left, the step no one dared dream of: 100%. He stood there, chest heaving, sweat pouring down his face, the blade humming so violently that his bones rattled. His knuckles whitened as he tightened his grip. For a moment, he hesitated. The sword seemed to sense it, its hum rising into a piercing note, demanding release. At 100%, he swung. The world broke. Steel walls, thick and unyielding, were sliced as though they were paper. The blade did not cut through them. It erased them. Matter itself split apart, edges clean and unnatural, as though the very laws of physics had surrendered. The sound was deafening, but more than that, it was final. The strike left behind a silence that weighed heavier than any explosion. The cut extended further than sight. What stood in its path ceased to exist, not destroyed but unmade. An entire fortress, stone towers, and iron gates simply vanished in an instant. Witnesses could not describe it. Some said the blade devoured reality. Others swore they saw a glimpse of endless void in the path of the strike. At that moment, everyone understood. This was no weapon. This was judgment. At 10%, it was sharp. At 100%, it was absolute. And the man who wielded it now carried not a sword, but the power to end everything. But the story does not end there. For every strike at full power demanded a price. His hands trembled uncontrollably, veins bulging with energy not meant for human flesh. His eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the unnatural force surging through him. Whispers filled his head, voices that were not his own, urging him to strike again, to unleash more, to consume. Each heartbeat felt like a hammer blow, each breath like fire in his chest. The sword was not a tool, it was a pact, and every time it touched 100%, the line between wielder and weapon blurred. Was he still a man, or had he become the sword itself? Legends say the blade was forged with a single purpose: to test humanity's limits. At 10%, it revealed skill. At 50%, it revealed fear. At 100%, it revealed truth. That no human was meant to hold such power without losing themselves. And yet, once tasted, who could resist? The wielder's eyes lingered on the blade's edge, his breathing shallow. Around him lay ruins, silence, and ash. No enemies remained, no structure stood, no sound dared rise. All that was left was the echo of the strike and the dreadful knowledge that if the blade could do this in one world, it could do more in another. Somewhere, someone would challenge it again. Somewhere, another hand would grip the hilt, tempted by whispers of limitless power, and the sword would wait. Waiting for the next strike, waiting for the next soul to test its edge, waiting for the moment when someone else would dare push beyond 100%.